Welcome to the Only Dream Big podcast, starring your host, Donnie Bedney. Only Dream Big is a podcast where Donnie will share tips and experiences on different topics, such as acquisition entrepreneurship, human capital, and the future of the workforce. He is the president of PSP Metrics and has been in the assessment and human capital management industry for more than 15 years, with the goal of driving change through people. As your guide on dreaming big, let's hear from the man
Welcome
himself.
back, everyone, to another episode of the Only Dream Big podcast. I'm your host, Donnie Bedney. Officially brand new with a standing desk, so I am energized and ready for this conversation, but also so excited to have my close friend and brother, Zach Ellis, on the pod with us today. I know for a fact there will be some gems, bombs, insert synonym dropped today. As we're going to be, covering some topics that I think are just going to be transformational for all of your lives. So, Zach, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure to be here with you, Donnie.
Loving it, man. Loving it. So, want to be cognizant of your time because know how full your calendar is and stuff, but want to hop in, my friend, and as you think about it, right? We have had, frankly, we've known each other for a long time, right? At this point, worked at an organization together, before the Gallup organization, and I'm going to walk the people back to, our days in DC. I think my office was like on the back wall, somewhere. And I remember specifically just, small office, but we had like these whiteboards on the wall, and remember some specific like strategy sessions, that we would have together. And at that point, we were working in consulting, but you had, larger dreams, right? Working in venture and investing in companies and all these kind of things. And so you can take the people back, before then or anything. But one of the powerful things that I'd love for you to, cover for us a little bit is, can you talk through, kind of, or take us back to where you were at that point, and, as to, where you are today, because I feel like I can take it back to that first conversation as basically like, now I've witnessed it manifest into your life. And obviously we're on the Only Dream Big podcast. So just being able to share like a real story of how you've been able to transition multiple times, frankly, throughout your career, but even, to a completely different industry.
Yeah. I think I would first take everyone back to kind of like the type of headspace I was in at that point in time. So I began my career out of college in the military. Mm-hmm. So I served 7 years active duty in the military, loved my time in the military. And then as I was transitioning out, went to business school and was on a personal mission to do something that I felt would be as important and impactful in corporate life as serving in the military was to me. And so that kind of set the tone for my corporate career. And I knew I wanted to be in business. I knew I wanted to run businesses and that sort of thing, but I didn't really know what kind of business and how and why. And so, to me, what made the most sense was if I want to eventually run a business one day, I should learn how they work. I should probably fix some of their problems. And that's how I kind of got into consulting. So given my journey through consulting, I was at a place where I was still trying to figure out my fit, how my skill sets could, most effectively be applied. Because at the end of the day, like I wasn't fulfilled in what I was doing, right? I wasn't necessarily that happy. I was doing things that I thought were right, that I thought made sense, particularly according to kind of like the mantra that business school gives you about developing certain skill sets and what sounds sexy and all that sort of thing. But I was coming to learn that I was naturally good at certain things and had less interest in other things. And one of the big lessons we learned working where we did together was that, like, you should focus on your strengths, right? And so I was going through this maturation, this personal maturation of trying to not only identify and understand my strengths, but to really focus on them and identify jobs and industries that would allow me to only work through them. And because I found, I didn't just hear it from conventional wisdom, but I found through practice that when I sort of leaned into what I was really good at, I had outsized, positive results.
Sure.
And so that's kind of where I was in my life. I'm like, what is it? Like, I know I'm somewhat analytical. I know I like numbers. I know I want to take advantage of the fact that, I think I'm smart. But I also know that I'm really good with people, not naturally the most focused on details. I'm a kind of a strategy guy. Like, how do I bring all these things together, right? And then even some of those things where, one might consider somewhat, sort of selfish and silly. Like, I knew I liked to travel, and I knew I liked, that sort of stuff, right? But I knew I didn't want to be in sales, and I knew I didn't want to, be a flight attendant, right? Like, and so it's like, what makes the most sense? And so, and so this story as well as anyone. One day, I go to attend this workshop on creating Black wealth. And well, that's great. That's not like the important part of this story. There was this panel of people speaking on their careers.
Was this CBC? This is like CBC, right? Congressional Black Caucus. All right, perfect. Yep.
And most of the people on the panel were real estate investors.
Yep.
And there was this one person who was a private equity / venture capitalist. And while that was interesting, what sort of gave me the revelation I needed that day and set me on a new path was how he got there. So he goes on to tell this story about he started his career as a physician, and that life was good as a physician. He was making more money than all his friends, and he was doing this, doing that, and like he didn't think life could get any better. He had the house, boat, cars, happy kids, like everything was great. But talked about how he discovered private equity. And I won't bore everyone with that story. But after having discovered it, made the decision to make a hard switch on his life. To just stop what he was doing as a practicing physician. And to completely pivot into being a professional investor and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
While you're saying this, I'm literally going to look this guy up on LinkedIn because we're going to tag him. But anyway, continue the story.
This man single-handedly with a 5-minute story changed my life. So, and there were some things I knew about the venture capital industry and I was kind of mulling about, but I was, and I thought it would be something I'd be interested in, but I didn't know how to get there. The boot camps that we see today about how to break into VC that are offered by great organizations like Black VC and others did not exist. We did not see the sort of social justice activism around actively recruiting diversity into the industry that we see right now. There's probably no more than 10 Black VCs in all of America at that point in time. And I may be exaggerating, I may not be. It was that bad during those days.
It was pretty bad.
The fact that this man, was willing to throw away everything he had built to make a completely different career choice inspired me, because I was like, well, if this man can, make this change, I've got less to lose than he does, or he did at that time. So there's no reason I can't do the same thing.
1,000%.
I just decided that day that there was nothing that was going to hold me back. And ironically, a lot of things in my life were coming together at that point in time that all reinforced this message. I had just met with a friend of mine who told me, like, look, if you want to do something, just do it. I had just watched, Will Smith's now famous interview with Tavis Smiley, where he talked about, just the power of making a decision. And just doing whatever it is you want to do, and the universe sort of molding around you. and moving out of your way. Like all these sort of messages were like bouncing around in my head. And then to see someone who had actually done it and given up something that is widely considered highly lucrative to go do something else that was riddled with nothing but risk and didn't have a lot of diversity in it was just the most awe-inspiring thing that I had ever seen. And
That's
so
amazing.
It lit a fire in me that has paid tremendous dividends because literally taking that first step, which is another message that had been bouncing around in my head. If you don't know how to do something, just take the first step. And then when you get there, take the next step. And then when you get there, just look around, take the next step. And that set me on the path that led me where I am today. So I'll kind of stop there and see if you guys.
So many nuggets, man, that you just shared. I mean, that taking the next step, kind of piece is definitely, an aspect that we're going to replay over and over again. I'm sure. But the other thing that I'd love for you to unpack a little bit for folks, I believe the guy's name was Neelan Youngblood. So, shout out to Neelan. Shout out to Neelan. Because I think you guys are in Texas now, so there's no reason you guys should actually connect. For sure. So, Neelan, holla at my boy Zach. Y'all need to talk. I'm sure there's some stuff that you guys can partner on now. Actually, so that'll be good. But I think that there's so much power, man. And one of the things you shared, which is just being able to see someone who has done what you kind of aspire to do, right? And so investment obviously is there's many different ways to invest, private equity, venture capital, et cetera. And I'm sure we'll unpack some of that and your passion for venture, and that path that you kind of took. But can you continue to talk a little bit just about that was kind of the catalyst for you to take that first step. But we've also talked, previously about it. Almost as soon as you kind of took that step and started making that move, you discovered that there were many more people, right? And maybe not a million, right? But it goes back to a verse that you had told me about, and we'll bridge the verse, right? But it was it's the whole verse of less is more. There's plenty of us.
Yeah.
So how many, how were you intentional once you discovered that there was at least one person who had, kind of done what you aspired to do? How were you intentional, and what kind of steps did you take to kind of surround yourself with more people who had done similar things?
Yeah. So it's also important to know that at that point, like I was in this, I had turned into this position of just being bold and just doing what was on my mind, right? So that's the kind of the context. Because to me, there's one thing to see someone doing something you want to do, but then like, how do you get there is always like, at least for me, is what's usually been the tough part. But so the first thing I did at that point, I was engaged to be married at that point. My now wife was a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin, and so I was in the process of kind of networking in Madison, Wisconsin, to identify potential career opportunities. And instantly, my sort of searching went from like GE Healthcare and other companies that were in the Madison area to like venture capital. And lo and behold, I found a venture fund, narrowly focused.
Yep.
And sure enough, I found a venture capital fund headquartered in Madison, Wisconsin, called Venture Investors. They're still around today, not too far away from where my wife lives, as a matter of fact. And lo and behold, I'm looking at the partners at this fund. One of them's Black.
Wow.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
And I'm like going through my mind, okay, I'm going to reach out to this person. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to ask for a coffee next time I'm in town, blah, blah, blah. I'm working it all out in my head.
Yep.
And that very afternoon, I'm on the phone with my fiance, telling her that I found this fund. And at this point, she's still like, yeah, you want to do this CVVC thing? I don't know what it is, but I'm supporting you. Like, you go, babe. And I tell her that I find this fund,
Yeah.
and then, lo and behold, one of the partners is black, and I'm just like, talking about how I want to meet this person, etc.
Mhm.
And then she says, "Wait, I think I know who you're talking."